Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Hispanic Reading Room of the Library of Congress, and happy Hispanic Heritage Month, everyone. Yay! I am Catalina Gomez. I am a reference librarian and a curator here in the Latin American, Caribbean, and European Division of the Library of Congress. I am part of a team of librarians here, and let me just say that for us in the Hispanic Reading Room, every month is Hispanic Heritage Month. Every day is Hispanic Heritage Day. The study of the histories and the cultures of Latin Americans, of Spanish, Portuguese, Latino, Latinx peoples is what we live and breathe and what we do here every single day. It is such a thrill to have you all here today for this event. We are hosting today's program in collaboration with the Library of Congress Literary Initiatives Office, and also in partnership with Letras Latinas, the literary program of the Institute for Latino Studies at the University of Notre Dame. Special thanks to Clay Smith and Rob Casper from Literary Initiatives, Francisco Aragon from Letras Latinas, Allison Williams and Suzanne Shadle from LACE, as well as to the library's events office, the multimedia group, and everyone who's making this event possible today. Our panel tonight will feature a delightful and brilliant group of poets and writers. I could not be more excited. With us is former U.S. Poet Laureate Juan Felipe Herrera, award-winning poet and author Maria Kelson. Yeah, we can clap. Yeah, you guys can clap. Very exciting. And award-winning poet, author, and anthropologist Ruth Behar. A discussion following the reading by our three poets will be moderated by the poet Dan Vera. Juan Felipe Herrera was born in Fowler, California in 1948. He's the author of more than 30 books of poetry, including Half the World in Light, New and Selected Poems, Notes on the Assemblage, and Every Day We Get More Illegal. He has also published multiple young adult and children's books. Herrera served as the United States Poet Laureate from 2015 to 2017, as the Poet Laureate of California from 2012 to 2015, and some of his other honors include fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation, the National Endowment for the Arts, the PEN USA National Poetry Award, the Ezra Jack Keats Award, and the Ruth Lilly Poetry Prize. Maria Kelson writes crime fiction, short stories, essays, and poetry. She's the author of the poetry collections How Long She'll Last in This World, Flexible Bones, and her most recent book, the crime novel Not the Killing Kind, was just released 9 days ago. Her poetry and prose have appeared in Poetry Magazine, Orion, Miss Magazine, Flash Fiction Magazine, and numerous anthologies. She currently teaches literature and writing at Pueblo Community College in Pueblo, Colorado. Ruth Behar was born in Havana, Cuba. Known as a writer, anthropologist, and professor, Behar is the author of close to 10 books, including Santa Maria del Monte, The Presence of the Past in a Spanish Village, Translated Woman, Crossing the Border with Esperanza's Story, Lucky Broken Girl, and recently her historical novel, Across So Many Seas. She has contributed to numerous anthologies and publications on Cuban, feminist, and Jewish subjects. Behar has been awarded a MacArthur Fellowship, the Belpré Award, and the Belpré Medal, and the Pura Belpré Author Award, among other honors. She currently resides in Ann Arbor and is a distinguished professor of anthropology at the University of Michigan. Dan Vera, our great moderator today, is an American poet of Cuban descent born in southern Texas. He is the author of 2 books of poetry, including Speaking Weedy Weedy and The Space Between Our Danger and Delight, and he has an upcoming book coming out next year. He was also the editor of the book Iman Iman, Poets Writing in the Ansalduan Borderlands. He is the publisher of Souvenir Spoon Press and the chair of Split This Rock. So before I turn things over to Dan, I just wanted to briefly mention that in addition to highlighting the work of our poets here today, we really wanted to celebrate this event, some of the really wonderfully rich connections that have emerged between these poets, their work, and some of our collections and offerings here at the Library of Congress. Our 4 participants tonight have all become in the last 10 years part of the Palabra Archive, which is a collection of audio recordings of Hispanic and Latino authors reading from their works that has been curated here in the Hispanic Reading Room since 1943. By adding their voices to this historic repository, our poets have joined a project that now contains more than 850 voices that spans 33 countries and more than 15 languages, and that includes figures like Gabriel García Márquez, Pablo Neruda, Gabriela Mistral, Jorge Luis Borges, Juan Rulfo, and Isabel Allende. In addition, some of the new exhibitions opening here at the library are featuring audio excerpts of these poets' Palabra Archive recordings, a listening station including Ruth and Maria's poems, among the poetry of other Palabra recorded writers, is now part of the recently inaugurated Collecting Memories exhibition. And if you guys haven't had the chance to see this exhibit, I really invite you and urge you to go see it. It's really, really beautiful. And audios featuring Juan Felipe's work have also been selected for an upcoming orientation gallery that will be opening in the next couple of years. So we invite you all to check out the Palabra Archive and the Collecting Memories exhibit. For the former, you can visit our website at loc.gov and search Palabra Archive. And the Collecting Memories Gallery is located on the second floor here in the Great Hall of the Jefferson Building. Last but not least, I also invite you all to check out our Latinx alcove, which is a little corner here in our reading room that some of you might have seen when you walked in. Our wonderful Latino Studies librarian, Danny Thurber, curated the space with a lot of love and care, and it is a new reference collection that is devoted to Latino studies here in our reading room. Thank you again for coming. Please note that this event will be recorded, so your entry and presence at the program constitutes your consent to be filmed or otherwise recorded. There will be time for audience questions at the end, so please wait for the microphone that will be circulating around the room. And without further ado, I will turn now things over to Dan. Thank you so much.
Well, welcome everyone. Dan gave me the go-ahead to kick things off, so I appreciate that. I've known Dan for about 15 years, and I hope you'll look up his poetry if you don't know it already, and I hope you'll go to Split This Rock if you don't go already. It's just a tremendous, tremendous festival. So I have 3 or 4 poems I'm going to read. I'm going to time myself so that I make sure it's nice and short. I also wanted to mention, Catalina mentioned Juan Felipe's children's books. So I just want to put a shout out for Super Cilantro Girl. Super Cilantro Girl, a favorite in my house with my kids. Yes, I'm getting some fist pumps back there. So if you're looking for your next children's picture book, Super Cilantro Girl is one I would recommend. So thank you so much, Catalina and my fellow speakers, for celebrating Hispanic Heritage Life. And thank all of you for coming here to celebrate with us. This is just a wonderful event. So the first one that I will read here is from the Green Book. I have 2 collections of poetry, and think of them as the Green Book and the Beige Book, and I think they're both here. I live in Wyoming now, and my husband and I moved back in May after having lived there almost 30 years ago, 27 years ago. So this poem was written in Wyoming when we lived there in 1997, and I was having my first baby while we were there, and at the time, it was a mecca for tourism, the part of Wyoming we were in, the Grand Teton National Park area, and it is even more a mecca for tourism now, for good reason. It's beautiful. But at the time, there was a well-publicized immigration raid in the area, and that was at the same time that I was having my son, around the same time. So that inspired this poem. In the early months of snowmelt, 1997. In a cabin on the upper Ditch Creek drainage of the Jackson Hole Basin in Wyoming, thick weekly paper, laid out tabloid style, brought word of a mudslide in Hoback Canyon, and a roundup of Mexicans, over 100 of them, hauled out of town in windowless silver trailers. Meanwhile, the elk were offered refuge on the valley floor, in meadows near the hospital, where I'd recently labored to add 1/4 of a Mexican to the population, and discovered my life to be profoundly mammalian. What could I say about the trailers? The dirty business of keeping a limited class at leisure in mountain resorts. Besides the newborn, I carried new depression around, sorrow near to me as cord blood, disguised as one of life's essential fluids. In my teens, I'd hiked the Tetons, practicing the work that scientists do, describing the moss campion and the class 3 ram, slogging through mud to revegetate old horse camps. But I was utterly unschooled in the foolish dialects of heart required to answer another whose needs had latched completely onto mine. There is no field camp for breastfeeders in training. Walking on walking, underfoot earth turns, streams and mountains never stay the same. Trudging with baby around our orbital on the campus of Teton Science School, cabin to dining lodge, work in the office, dining lodge, cabin, I lugged a diaper bag stuffed tight as a summit pack, 2 burp cloths, extra onesies, change of clothes, at least 6 diapers, Huggies Velcro when we could afford them, box full of wet wipes, fleece bodysuit, hat and mittens, plastic bags for leaked on clothes, pacifier, thin swaddling blankets, thick playtime blanket to spread on wooden floors, chew toys, changing pad, nursing pads, diaper cream. A neighbor, young woman, sneered at me as she sauntered out to her evening ski. Is all that really necessary? On a rare walk alone to Upper Meadow, I tried to identify the green shoots growing up between the bones of an old moose cow, winter kill from years ago. Her stout skeleton still guarding the remains of an unborn calf. Trips to town were my more typical adventure. Teton Valley Books and the county library, housed in an old log building on King Street. I checked out books on big things to keep me company as I cared for a tiny person in my one-room home with my one body. Torn and swollen. Sometimes I'd read out loud, sitting on the bed with the small boy propped in the bend of my knee, blinking up at me. Stories and poems come to us by way of a Colombian, a Wyoming, and a mountaineer of the mind. The titles may be familiar to any woman or man who's ever tried to rise from the billowy weight of a long winter. 100 Years of Solitude, Resurrection Update, Mountains and Rivers Without End. So that poem includes a few lines from each of those books that kept me going during postpartum depression, which I'm happy to say lifted, but which was real at the time, a part of my learning to be a mother. And so those books by James Galvin and, of course, Marquez and Gary Snyder, who was one of my poetry mentors, those books really sustained me during that time of snow and learning to be a mother and nursing and moving through postpartum depression to find the other side. So 2 more. This next one is called El Villain. And for you poetry fans, that title is joking with the poetry form called the Villanelle, which has 3 lines per stanza and has a repetition in a certain pattern. And it's in this book where Dan Vera's poetry is also to be found, also released last week, the Latino Poetry Collection in the Library of America. So be sure to put that on your TBRs also. El Villain. I fled the West Coast to escape them, but I still see illegals everywhere. whines a letter writer in our rural Utah paper applauding a local ICE raid. How does it feel to be a problem? Everyone, no one, wanted to ask Du Bois, circulating his elegant diction and mixed-race face among Atlanta glitterati, turn of the century, when the white sixth sense was, I can smell Negroes and Jews. The question, ICE is my hair and eyelashes, Al Rasa, one family of suspects in this age of roundups. Am I to breathe in prejudice, breathe out light? How does it feel to be a problem? Some well-meaning white ones want a Christ of me, Sacred Heart on display. Where are your documents naming this pain? They hope for a nibble of rage. I see Lourdes, 7 years old and sin documentos, embrace my daughter hello, goodbye every day on their school's front steps, the two of them giddy with girl pacts. When Lourdes solves subtraction problems safe at her dim kitchen table, how does her mother Elva feel as her daughter works a language that will never add up to home? Down the street, I see Rodolfo from El Salvador, legal refugee, dance the glee of Utah Jazz victory in front of his big screen. Ask him how pupusas feel in his mouth, corn dough communion with patria. His wife Ines is fourth-generation Mexican-American from Salt Lake City. Hell with these pedigrees, how does it feel for Rodolfo, Ines, Elva, Lourdes, me, to be seen as not quite right, not quite us, not from around here, are ya? I will not say. I will not display our stigmata. We shouldn't need papers to cross from familia to politics. Ask the seer of illegals, the maid of ethnic cleansing, how it feels to hold a broken feather duster. So as a Mexican-American woman, as a Chicana with citizenship privilege, I've always had a concern for undocumented people, especially from Mexico. That's where my father's family is from, but from anywhere. And it's been very stimulating to me how I can connect and offer support and take a role in justice for people without documents on the one hand, and on the other hand, there are some things I will never know about my friends who are undocumented, about their lives. There's like a border between us, or a barrier between us. So that's something I explore in this new book, Not the Killing Kind. That's part of what led me to write a crime novel. How we define what's criminalized is sort of determined in part by citizenship privilege. So I'll close with the poem that's in the exhibit in the other room, and I hope you'll go listen to Ruth. You can hear Ruth read her work over there in Juan Felipe, and see Ruth's dress that she's going to tell us about. So this one that I'll close with is called Westerner Exiled to the Affordable Midwest Comes Home. It's written with a little bit of a comic opening, in the idea that you want to be happy where you are because you're alive, you're on the right side of the ground, but some places you just can't. Some places you just can't even. And unfortunately, I couldn't even where it was so gray in the Midwest, and I'm used to the Mountain West. I'm used to the Mountain West country. So Westerner exiled to the affordable Midwest comes home. The epigraph is from Louise Gluck, also a little comic couplet. I thought my life was over and my heart was broken. Then I moved to Cambridge. After years of my discernment organ's failure, when tree after tree turned its back to me and sighed, after seasons of the whole earth's silent treatment, I'm starting to believe in eagles again. Gilbert Sorrentino said, "What's dead in you is dead. Don't trouble yourself with trying to be whole. Just go on down and visit those old parts now and then." No, I was dead to leaves and dead to sun, to feathers, beaks, and seeds. But finally, we're moving. While driving a life-loaded car through a long curve on 89, out of the Wasatch, not having to be jealous of people who say things like, out of the Wasatch, I swear to dog and coyote, I started to scan the uplift, the high bare cliffs, for whitewash below ledges, for nests. Thank you.
Well, let's give her another big hand. And let's give Catalina Gomez, our MC, a beautiful hand because it was such a great introduction. Thank you so much. Trabajando. I guess this is working, right? It's working? Well, well, it's great to see you. And so many friends also. And actually, a couple of cousins I didn't know I had right over here. Quintana sisters and their mom, Marines. So let's give them a big mano también. And this beautiful place, isn't it? Yeah. It's great. Let's give a hand to this beautiful place. Well, you know, I got a call from Syracuse University, the Centro Cultural, some time ago, upstate beyond upstate New York. And they said, Juan Felipe, can you send us 15 poems? I said, what? Can you send us 15 poems? Well, I can send you 15 poems if you want 15 poems. And so I'm going to read my chicharrón sombrero from those 15 poems right now. So I had a lot of fun. You know, just write, just have fun. And I had a lot of fun writing those 15 poems. And thanks for talking about Wyoming. It's just a beautiful place, it really is. So I'm gonna put this to the side, wherever the side is. It's a spatial problem, and I'm gonna put on my my close-up glasses because my right eye had cataract. So then they put a robotic lens in it or something like that. So if I have these glasses on, I can read a little bit better. I was in Sacramento, I couldn't see anything. And I said, well, thank you very much, that's about it. That was my poem. Really, because you can't read, because my eye requires this kind of lens so I can actually read the language down here, the typing. So everybody ready for chicharrón, my chicharrón hat? Yeah. Everybody say, we are ready for my chicharrón hat. Oh, yeah. So let's do this together, okay? I'll say the line and you just jump in and repeat the line, okay? Here we go. My chicharrón hat. I'm acting strange today. Maybe it's because the blue-black sun. It's pouring its hydrogen gum rays on my chicharrones. And my stylish lapels. The shape of furious pelicans. My chaps, you ask me? From 1955 on Lincoln Road. You are right, totally right. People laugh, people squint. Who will be the next president? They collect tiny reddish stones in search of Ultimata Alefa. Where is she? Where is me? What is life now? I've been here and there. It curls, it sizzles. It is part of something unknown, multiplying on your head. There it is. My chicharrón hat. Oh, I had a lot of fun. I'm going to pass this. What am I passing? I'm passing something. Who knows? Life, maybe. I'll put this away. I'll put it away. These are the 15 crazy poems. Okay. Thank you. Muchas gracias. So that's one of the 15. Did you like that one? Yeah. I just said, I'm just going to put down, whatever comes to my mind, and I'm going to have some fun, and I'll just throw in some interesting phrases and let them pop a little bit, and things I usually wouldn't say, but now I'm going to say them. That's what those 15 poems did. And I'm going to go to this book now. Every day, everybody say, every day, we get more illegal. ¿Qué está pasando? Right, what's going on. And now we got some other things going around, plus little cats and little dogs. Yeah, come on, and, let's keep it, they're good friends. So this is one of the poems from Every Day We Get More Illegal. I began to feel like all of us, that every day it appears there's another law, there's another idea, there's another effort, there's another project that's made, that's put together and released through political zones and laws to be applied on migrants. I remember signing and filling out the registration alien form for my mother. I was in middle school, and we used to hang out in El Perro, which is the bus depot. We go to the Perro because the Perro was cool. There was a jukebox machine, and there was aisles where you could sit down, watch people go places, and there was shoe shine, and there was candy, and there were magazines. It was a cool place to be. That was my entertainment center. It's true. So this thing about alien and illegals, we've been dealing with this quite a while. So you and I, we're going to take care of that, aren't we? We're going to take care of it. We want to take care of it a little bit, from a little bit to a lot of bit, okay? So let's take care of it, even if it's a little bit or a lot of bit. And a poem is a good step. So your voice is an excellent step. And your true inner self-expression is a super step. So feel free to just come on out with your real feelings and express yourself. We don't express ourselves, we're going to be invisible. And expression is so beautiful because it's a human being. It's almost like a song. Our voice is like a song. So let's sing and let's express ourselves. This is called We Were the Invisible Ones. And that's still kind of happening. We were visible, then invisible. We were visible. Ocean and geometry, ocelot and panther, then invisible, then deeper, available, invisible, then pyramid, then sulfur, then rainforest, audacious, origin of strings, then the field grain of slaves, then visible, then lines of protest across tiny ranches and boulevards, then invisible ones, then offices of straw in the fires, then visible, time, stone, light, and more light, twirlers, then the invisible ones, more suns and divisions, then visible. For a moment, we existed, jaguars, sea, mist, in between the cement, in between lorries and shackles, in between migrant porches. We were the visible ones. So let's stay visible. That's this poem from here. Help me get to this one.
Let's get to that one.
Our good friend Robert Casper, he's a great guy. He's part of the laureate department and the poetry department that we have had here a long time. It was a great experience to be with him and with Catalina and all our brothers and sisters that were part of the Laureate Project. And I came on, which was amazing and beautiful, to visit so many places across the United States. Here's this one. Every day we get more illegal, yet the peach tree still rises and falls with fruit, and without birds eat it. The sparrows fight. Our desert burns with trash and drug. It also breathes and sprouts vines and maguey. Laws passed, laws with scientific walls, detention cells, husband with his son, wife and the daughter who married a citizen. They stay behind, broken, slashed, half shadows, in the apartment to deal out the day. And the puzzles, another law, then another Mexicano, Indian, spirit, exile, migration, sky. The grass is mowed, then blown by a machine. Sidewalks are empty, clean, and the red-shouldered hawk peers down from an abandoned wooden dome, an empty field. It is all in between the light. Every day this changes a little. Yesterday, homeless and without papers, Alberto left for Denver, a Greyhound bus, he said, where they don't check you, walking, working under the silver darkness, walking, working, our mind, our life. That's that one. It's can you help me get to that one? Thank you. You know, some poems are more direct, don't you think? Some poems are more direct, and other ones we really weave and embroider and paint and jump in and experiment and break lines and have a lot of fun, like with sombreros made out of chicharrones. And some, you know, have pauses in them. They jump, a word jumps to 3 words later. So, you know, we kind of have to flow in and out of the poem as opposed to trying to squeeze it and make it solid. We can do those too. It's like how we think, how we feel. Sometimes we have the full feeling. Sometimes we have a burst of feeling, then, ooh, you know, pause, and then, ooh, and then more feeling. So that's the way poems work. We come in and out. I want to speak of unity. This is the 3rd poem, right? This is the 3rd poem. This is the last poem all of a sudden. I told Robert Casper, I said, Juan, don't talk so much, just do the poem. And it is true. I discovered I'm a blabbermouth. It is true. I didn't start like this. I started very quiet. I never spoke. I didn't know how to have a conversation. I didn't know how to respond to the teacher. I was afraid. I was ashamed. I was nervous. I was filled with anxiety. That's how I began, until I jumped into choir. So I want to jump into choir, because if I do that, they're going to make me express myself. They're going to make me get in front of everybody, and they're going to make me sing. They're going to make me follow the notes on the piano. So I said, I better do that, because I'm going to keep on hiding. I didn't want to hide anymore. Otherwise, I would have to meet up with my cousins Quintana, and they would make me do 20 push-ups right on the spot. Because they're solid Marines, okay? They're solid Marines. So I have to really, you know, watch what I do. I want to speak of unity. I want to speak of unity, that indescribable thing we have been speaking of since '67. When I first stepped into LA with a cardboard box, luggage piece, I was distracted by you, your dances, askew and somersaults, the kind you see at shopping centers, and automobile super sale events. I'm having a hard time reading. The horns and bayonets, most of all. I wanted to pierce the density, the elixirs of everything, something like Max Beckman's paintings did in that restaurant painting of 1937, or was it 1938? Exiled from Germany, banned, and blaming black jacket, that everything in a time of all things in collapse, that embrace, that particular set of syllables of a sudden attack, or just a breath of a song, the one I would hear back in the early 50s when I walked the barren earth with my mother and father, the sound of one, when Luz was still lived, and Felipe still parted the red lands and no one knew we existed in the fires, the flames that consume all of us now. That's that one. Thank you. Muchas gracias. You got one there too? Got it.
Another hand for Juan Felipe Herrera, Poet Laureate. Wow. Well, I am so incredibly honored and grateful and feeling very blessed to be here, and also extremely humbled to be here with maestros and maestra of poetry. So thank you so much. Happy Hispanic Heritage Month to everybody. I'm feeling a lot of Latina pride right now. How are you all feeling? I think Latina, Latino, Latinx, Hispanic pride, really amazing. So delighted to be part of this community. So thank you so much. Thank you, Catalina, for organizing this. And thank you all for being here tonight. So I've got a couple of things here. I just have to bend down. Let's see what we got here. We'll do it in installments. Yeah. Okay. So the last time I spoke here, I was in conversation with a very dear friend, the master bookmaker and poet Rolando Esteves, who'd come from Matanzas, Cuba, to speak about and share his work around the art of the book. That was in 2018. We had hoped to do another presentation together focusing on the spectacular poetry dress he had made that I think many of you have seen. And here's the interesting thing. He made it to fit my measurements. We would communicate on WhatsApp, and one day he just called me and he said, I need all of your measurements. And I said, okay, well, I can get my chest and my waist and hips. No, I need every single measurement. Your shoulders, everything. He said, you have to go to a professional tailor or seamstress and get all your measurements. And so I did. And it was to make this dress that was made to fit me. And it has all these scrolls hanging from it, 45 poems by American and Cuban women. And we collaborated on this. And it's an amazing work of art, of poetry, and a rethinking of what the book can be. The book can be a dress with poems hanging from it. So unfortunately, he died in January of 2023. But he felt so blessed that the poetry dress would have a home at the Library of Congress. He would always say, mi obra está en la Biblioteca del Congreso. He was so incredibly proud, and now it's part of the Collecting Memories exhibit, and it's amazing, and I get goosebumps, escalofrío, every time I see it there. So Esteves and I met in the 90s, a long time ago, when I began to travel back and forth to Cuba, trying to search for my roots. He encouraged me to write poetry, to write in Spanish, as well as English. And I remain grateful for his mentorship and all that he taught me about poetry. So I want to begin by reading a poem that I dedicated to him called Island of Tears, or La Isla de Lágrimas. And it was published in a handmade book called Poemas que vuelven a Cuba, Poems Returned to Cuba. Whoops. There. Poems Returned to Cuba. And later, he made a one-of-a-kind book just for that one poem, Isla de Lágrimas, Island of Tears. I don't know if you can see it from where you are, but so it has these images of me and him, and then the island of Cuba is stamped on our foreheads. You can see that. So quite incredible. And so he had an interesting story. His family left Cuba in 1969. His parents and his sister left. She was 8 years old at the time. And he was 15, so he wasn't able to leave Cuba. That was considered military age at the time. So he stayed behind, and the idea was that eventually he would follow. Did, and he felt very abandoned because of that, and that was a sadness that he carried with him. So I want to read this poem to you. I'm going to read it in Spanish because I actually wrote this one in Spanish first. Isla de Lágrimas. No llores más, no fue tu culpa. Ten este pañuelo, estíralo si quieres, de Matanzas a Miami, y después suéltalo, que lo lleve volando, volando el viento, bien lejos, allá, a ese país que yo sé existe, de todas las cosas que hemos perdido, de todas las lágrimas que no caben más en ti ni en mí. Haremos otro país donde se desayuna macarrones con salsa picante y en la noche, alumbrada por cocuyos, se oye a Marta Valdés cantar: si vuelves, vuelve para que la vida pueda florecer. Escrito en español el 9 de junio de 1995 en Ann Arbor, a la 1 de la mañana, acordándome de Matanzas. Yeah, so here, if you can see, it has our tears joined together there at the back of the book. It's really beautiful. So I'm going to also read it to you in English. Island of Tears for Rolando Esteves. Don't cry anymore, it wasn't your fault. Take this handkerchief, stretch it if you want, from Matanzas to Miami, then let it go so the wind will carry it very far, to that country I know exists, made of everything we've lost, of all the tears that no longer fit inside you or me. Let's create another country where breakfast consists of macaroni and hot sauce, and in the night, lit by fireflies, you hear Marta Valdés sing, if you return, return so that life can flower again. Written in Spanish on June 9th, 1995, at 1 in the morning in Ann Arbor, remembering Matanzas. There you go. So he was part of a collective that made handmade books called Ediciones Vigía, and this was the first book that they published in Cuba by a Cuban American, so that was a very new thing at the time. Here? Okay, so, sorry, I'm a little discombobulated. Okay, there we go. So, here we go. So later, I wrote poems that appeared in another handmade book, Everything I Kept, Todo lo que guardé. Sorry. And these poems, I later tweaked them, changed them a little bit, and then they are printed now in this lovely edition of Everything I Kept, Todo lo que guardé, which has beautiful art by Esteves in it as well. So these poems were inspired by the work of a Cuban poet named Dulce Maria Loynaz, and I had the incredible honor to get to meet her in Havana before she died at the age of 95 in 1997. And by that time, she was very hard of hearing, and so she asked me to sit very close, and I read some of these poems to her. So that was really amazing. And there's a poem here. Well, let me show you the cover before I poems. So this book has a suitcase on the cover, and Esteves was very aware of my diasporic heritage, how I was also, as an anthropologist, always moving around and carrying a suitcase with my things wherever I went. And so it has a suitcase on the cover, and when you open it, there's an image there, if you can see, of Dulce Maria Loynaz and then of myself. And then the suitcase is filled with sand from Varadero Beach in Cuba, because he knew that that was where my parents had honeymooned. And so he gathered that sand, and I'm pretty sure I may have been conceived on that beach too. So I have a poem that I want to share. Well, more than one. I'll share two. That's in this book. And I'm going to read it from the print edition. And this poem is called Letter or Carta. And It is dedicated to another artist friend. Letter. My dear friend, I have the autumn leaves. You have the blue ocean. I have the wide and terrifying highways of the world. You have the crumbling streets of our island. I have the fear of a lamb in a den of wolves. You have the courage of a samurai warrior. I have silver and steel. I have a house too big for me and a calendar marking the days when I will be away. I have tomorrow and tomorrow. I have everything. You have the witness of your eyes. And in Spanish, it's a little different, that last line, tú tienes la mirada de tus ojos. So having been born on an island, surrounded by the sea on all sides, being the child of many diasporas, my ancestors crossed many seas so I could exist. I guess it's not surprising that the sea is a major protagonist in my writing. I love the sea, but I'm also very afraid of the sea. So I'm going to read you a poem on this theme called Freedom or Libertad. And you can see this section of the book begins with some beautiful artwork again by Rolando Esteves. Freedom. At last, I went to the ocean today, all alone. Why did I wait so long? Such beauty could have been mine days and days ago, but at least I went. I sat in the sand and opened my palms. I waited. I forgot I had been afraid. Soon I stopped waiting and felt freedom, vast, huge, unknowable, ravishing, divine. So I'm going to end here. Just a brief note about my new book, which is a young adult novel, Across So Many Seas. And so I want to tell you, Across So Many Seas, and in Spanish, A Través de los Mares, it features 4 girls of Spanish-Jewish ancestry living in different historical moments and in different cities. Poetry and song are at the heart of their identities. The first girl, Benvenida, is about to depart Spain in 1492, and she writes poems that will later be found by another girl centuries later, whose name is Paloma, and who may well be her descendant, and she will gaze at the stars and at the sky, think of the ancestors, and ask, when they gazed at these same stars, did they wish for some of the same things I do? Freedom, a home where we are welcome, and where we can also welcome others. Those are the things I wish for too. Thank you.
If you notice, I didn't have a lot of commentary in between because I really just wanted to hear their poetry. Please, let's give another round of applause. Thank you, Maria, Felipe, Ruth. I just have a few questions. Maria, the last time you were here, I've taken the opportunity to listen to the work that's in the collection, and I was really struck by a line that you wrote: "Destruction hasn't been your only story. All living things beyond you that you've loved, you've made love live in them." From your poem, Good News for Humans, this fantastic bestiary. And I guess I sort of wanted to use that line as an opportunity to ask you about sort of kind of your commitment to ecopoetics, and how that sort of affects your writing and how that's influenced the writing you've done, and specifically because you've got a book of prose out, how that's kind of extended itself into your prose work.
Yeah, thanks for the question. The two books of poetry, the beige and the green, do have quite a bit of poetry that is considered environmental or eco-poetic, as Dan said. And I think one of the challenges with that is that I'm an enthusiast by nature. I like learning about plants. I like learning about birds and trees and mountains and people. And when you take a scientific ecological gaze, there's ways of saying yes to things and ways of saying no to things in terms of what's like, for example, invasive plant species. From an ecological view, you need to say no to them, but from a poetic view, you say, well, there's another living thing that I'm interested in. So that kind of tension was, I think, fruitful for me. I wanted to write into that tension. And then I also wanted to write into the tension of affirming existence as it is, which is a hot mess in many ways. Existence as it is a hot mess in many ways. But we have brains, many of us, that are wired to talk about what's wrong. And that can't be the only story. There have to be other stories about what we do for and with each other and with our fellow living beings. So I'm glad you brought up that line, because I would consciously try to say, let me be sure I'm also telling the stories of what we're doing that's life-affirming as well as destructive. So that answers that. And how it fit into the novel, I think the novel was more about relationships in a certain place. It's set in Northern California, in the Redwood country. And so it was more about how human relationships form within a specific ecological place.
You mentioned Gary Snyder as sort of like an influence, and I guess that that made me think about sort of the sense of sort of our writing as being in conversation with other writers that kind of influenced us. And Juan Felipe, I'm remembering I live here in DC. I've gone to many poet laureate openings and closings, and I don't think that I'm underspeaking when I say that your presentations as poet laureate revolutionized my sense of sort of what the laureateship can do. That opening presentation was a celebration not only of your work, but also the work of a community of writers and lineages of writers that sort of influenced you and that you were in community with. And so I guess I'm, in this kind of month of sort of celebration and in this space that's sort of kind of filled with historical figures, if you could, I don't know, like how important is lineage, and sort of how do you find new ways to sort of be in conversation with those writers? Devin?
Well, that's a cool question. Well, my mother kicked it off. My mother was always singing. She told me my mother only went to third grade, and that was a high grade back then. It was like high school almost, because my mother was in an asylum, un asilo. What a terrible, in Spanish it sounds so, it was like asilo, it sounds it's cruel. An orphanage during the Mexican Revolution in 1910. And then, then my mother eventually, with my grandmother and my tia Lela, they got on a train, and a little tiny train, or a big train, in Mexico City, and came north somehow to Ciudad Juarez somehow. And Pancho Villa was going the opposite direction. That's a time period. Hey, Pancho, yeah, okay, come on by. It's better over here, Pancho. So they arrived in Ciudad Juarez, and made a little life. It was difficult. Regardless, though, she would sing me songs, and she told me that she had wanted to be a dancer. She wanted to be in theater, because in El Paso and Ciudad Juarez, the little teatritos, the little theaters, the little vaudevillian theaters were happening, and major radio stations were set up in the late 20s. So she wanted, and there was auditions, a call for auditions, and she wanted to get on that stage, and she wanted to get all dressed up, and she wanted to wear the color red, which was a taboo color, you know, and red shoes. That's another taboo thing for women. And so she wasn't allowed. And so she told me later on, you know, when I was already early teenager or so, she goes, I wasn't allowed to express myself and dance and perform and sing, but I want you to be free. I wasn't allowed to be free, but I want you to be free. So that got me rolling. That got me going. And like I said earlier, I didn't know how to speak really, get enough courage to get up on a stage and face everyone and say things. And my little, you know, my little bird voice, my nervous bird voice, I didn't want that to, you know, be exposed. And it even happened at UCLA when we got to UCLA in affirmative action, which was kind of hilarious, and it was also cool. Hilarious because the guys would walk around with big old giant briefcases and say, "Hey, Cricket, what you got there?" "Yeah, man, I got my briefcase, one. Yeah." And I said, "Well, what do you got in it?" "Nothing." Because he wanted to look like a student, you know, a university student. So my mother sang me songs, and she did a lot of, and I used to learn her songs, and corridos and ballads of the Border Patrol, picking up migrants and throwing them into a van and shackling them and taking them to prison. Those were the kind of songs I started with, my mother's songs. Corridos, El Contrabando del Paso. That was the name of that corrido. A las 11 de la noche estábamos desesperados, nos montaron en un coche con las manos mancornados.
Bravo.
So it's a lot of singing and a lot of riddles. It was a world of riddles, right? Remember them? Your parents, they had all kinds of little stories and riddles, and they're picking your brain.
Right.
And Juan Felipe, sí, Juanito, quiero ver. Sí, mamá. She said, fui al mercado, fui al mercado, compré bellas, vine a la casa y lloré con ellas. Okay, Juanito, what is that? Well, can you do it one more time, Mom?
Juan Felipe, I think we're going to have to bring you back for another riddle. Just another riddle.
So I'll finish it up, okay? Fui al mercado, compré bellas, vine a la casa y lloré con ellas. What's the answer? Cebollas. But cebollas, the term cebollas was deep into that puzzle. So then I began to learn how to break open puzzles and find hidden words. So my mom was the agent to all this.
The beginning, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you want to. Well, I guess, boy, we could spend an hour with each and every one of you, and it's this is a taste of this great work. Ruth, my last question really is for you, and I was really kind of struck with you mentioned the corridos. This new anthology that Rigoberto Gonzalez put together has one of the first sections is corridos, which he sort of includes as sort of a sense of sort of the historical basis of our poetry. And you're mentioning Dulce Maria, her work, the kind of Emily Dickinson of Cuba. Yeah. I guess if you could tell us about sort of how our work is in conversation with poets outside of the territorial United States. And I know it's a lot to sort of put on.
Oh, I love the question. And, I had never heard of her until I went to Cuba. I knew, of course, about Jose Marti, but kind of going on what Juan Felipe was talking about. I mean, I grew up listening to Cuban music because my parents were always playing Cuban music and dancing to the cha-cha-cha. And, of course, the most popular song was Guajira Guantanamera. Guantanamera, Guajira, Guantanamera, but then it has these verses, Yo soy un hombre sincero de donde crece la palma, and I didn't know that those were the poems of Jose Marti that were in that song, that had been brought to that song, and that I learned much, much later, so that I was like already hearing poetry when I was listening to that very popular song Guantanamera that every Cuban knows and sings, or at least in my generation did, and before. So I also had the musical influence. But then in Cuba, it was like getting an education in all the things Cuban that I didn't know because I didn't learn them here. And then when I heard about Dulce Maria Loynaz and read particularly Poemas Sin Nombre, her nameless poems, they're prose poems, and I just found them they are like Emily Dickinson's. I mean, they're just very profound and deep, but also written like with a sincerity and simplicity of language that I just found very, very compelling. And then I had this opportunity to meet her. And what was so interesting about her was that after the Cuban Revolution, she kind of went underground. She stopped writing. You know, the last poem she wrote was in 1958, Últimos días en una casa, the last days in a house, and it was like on the eve of the revolution. And then her poems didn't seem revolutionary enough in those, particularly in those heyday years of the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So she kind of stuck around. She could have left Cuba, but she stayed in this mansion that, you know, she had lived in forever, and it became more and more dilapidated, but she hung on there, and, you know, kind of like, you know, she was like very sure of herself as a poet, but didn't have anything new she wanted to say. And then everybody started discovering her. When she was in her late 80s and early 90s, people were rediscovering her. And Rolando Esteves himself was rediscovering her and telling me about her. And that was how I first learned about her. And the way things were in Cuba at that time when I went in the 90s was you could knock on the door of a famous person, like Dulce Maria Loynaz, and say, "Hi, I'd like to meet you." And she'd go, "Okay, come on in."
Wow.
You know?
Wow.
And one of the things I remember in her house that really struck me, she had a large glass case, and inside she had a collection of abanicos, of fans, of beautiful handmade, hand-painted fans, a huge, huge display of them. But she was very kind and very modest. I even went there with my husband at one point, and our son, who maybe was like 5 years old at the time and was running around inside this falling apart mansion while we were talking about poetry. But she was very open to it, and I never knew whether she liked my poems or the fact that I would bring her cookies from the United States every time I visited.
Probably a little of both.
Probably a little bit of both.
I just wanted to add, you mentioned Martí and Guantanamera. The circles within circles, Martí wrote that in upstate New York.
Yes.
He wrote Versos Sencillos, that Cuban of most Cuban songs. He wrote, you know, in a small village in a,
Yeah.
so, you know, that's an American, those are American poems written
Exactly,
by
but
Cuban living in, yes,
and
very
written
much
in
so.
Spanish.
Written in Spanish.
Written in
exactly.
Spanish in the Catskills. It's just,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it's amazing. Yeah.
So anyway, let's please give another round of applause to these great poets.